Away with the teacup.
Shit, I thought no, we have to start again.
No, Jonathan. Everyone will hear and see this. Great shame.
Every time we come into the start of this recordings, I want to like have like the last sip of, and it doesn't work out. Anyway, here we are. Yeah, welcome
Oh.
back, Thorbjørn.
Welcome back, yeah, to you too.
In the arena again, the two of us and everyone listening in.
Yeah, this is possibly, I think, one of the juiciest things ever we're going to talk about today. And that is what I would call enlightened.
Curious.
I would call enlightened relationships, or being true to love.
Ooh, straight from the heart. True to love.
Yeah.
Okay, this is going to be a good one.
Yeah, and I actually took some notes for the first time, and I think I'm going to ignore those notes, but I did take notes for this one.
All right. Sounds like there's something pretty important to share, as always, Thorbjørn.
Yeah, I've wanted to talk about relationships for a long time, but I've been single for like 3 years, and I felt like I had to be in it to talk about it, for it to be like real and authentic, because it's so easy to talk about shit you're not in, right? That's
too easy.
Yeah. So now that I'm in a relationship and I am experiencing what that's like again, I can finally talk about this and feel that there's some, legitimacy behind bringing it up, because now I remember how terrible it is sometimes. So now we can get into it.
Okay, so you're saying terrible, but every time you talk to me about this, you've pretty much been on this pink cloud of joy, right? So interesting combination of the two. But that's relationships, right?
Isn't that exactly what relationships are?
Mm.
It's hell and it's a pink cloud.
Usually, like the first stages of the relationship are quite, up there with the love, energy, like open heart, everything. So
yeah.
But you're experiencing something else already. So that's interesting.
I always skip the early steps. It's not really for me, the whole like bullshit thing. I just go deep as fast as possible. So yeah, I really wanted to talk about relationship, because one thing I found is that with my spiritual practice and just getting better at life as we do by living and experimenting, I find that most areas of my life are working pretty well. Like I'm able to show up the way I want to most of the time, right? And I think you are as well. And then suddenly, I get back into a relationship, and with the right triggers, suddenly like I'm just like I turn into an insane person. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting, because it's been 3 years since my last relationship, and I thought I had like outgrown it, but no, I'm still an insane person. It just needs to be triggered the right way. So
you're trying to say that you react like any other partner in a relationship when something pushes your buttons.
Yeah, and that's what I think is so interesting about love, is that how we can be well-functioning members of society, but then we get into a relationship and we just go nuts now and then. And that's such a fascinating thing, I think.
Yeah. And so what is it triggering you? If you want to talk about that, like that's
Yeah. Well, first I want to say generally that I think one of the biggest problems with relationships is that people have this idea that relationships make you happy. I think that's where most of the trouble comes from. And we have all these movies and Disney, and we have this like illusion that if you find the right person, that person will make you happy. And that's that's almost the opposite of what happens. Because I think if you find the right person, they'll show you why you're not happy. And that gives you a chance to grow and become happy. But love is like a needle to remove a thorn. Love hurts, but it allows you to remove something that is deeper and worse. The pain of love can heal your old wounds. And if you don't understand that, then you go into relationships expecting the other person to make you happy all the time, and they can't do that, and then you end up fighting a lot. And that's, I think, is how many relationships end up being.
Like end up being or end?
Well, I think they either end up ending, or they end up in a compromise of 1,000 cuts where there is so much resentment and so many old things that have been rehashed so many times but has never been cleared out. And just kind of clog up the pipes of love until there's no room for love or intimacy anymore, because every kind of intimacy just leads back to an old grievance that is still stuck inside someone's emotional system. And so it becomes some kind of compromise where people are just like, let's try not to step on each other's emotional landmines. Let's just try to get through the day. Love is not going to happen, but at least we have each other. It's better than nothing. And it's too much to leave, everything that we've got going. And maybe nobody wants me out there anyway, so I'm just going to stay in this. That's kind of how I see a lot of relationships go. Because the idea is that the other person has happiness and they're here to give me happiness. I think that's the idea that destroys most relationships.
Say it again, Thorbjørn. The other person has happiness, and
the idea that the other person has my happiness and they're supposed to give it to me.
So you kind of put your happiness, so to speak, outside of yourself, like relying on the other person to fill your cup, or to
because we know that when our partner does the right thing, it stimulates us, it gives us happiness. And then the way the ego thinks is, well, okay, so I just need to press those buttons all the time so I can get a steady stream of pleasure and happiness. But that's more like it's more like stimulation than happiness. Like happiness is something we have to get for ourselves. What our partner can give us is more like, stimulation, or it can give us someone to share things with, or it can give us a lot of things, but it's not supposed to fill the hole inside of us. And if we think it is, then typically I think the relationship is more or less doomed from the beginning.
How do you become aware of that going into the relationship? Because you're going into the relationship right now. And so what I'm hearing is that you're aware of this thing of like not relying on her to give you the happiness and things like that.
I'm becoming aware because of how fucking painful it is when I try to do that. Because I see that when, if I'm triggered, because, for me, we all have these emotional wounds from the childhood. And what's so amazing about love is that love and intimacy, it brings up the old wounds, the old trauma. And that's why some people, quite cleverly, they avoid love, because they know that love goes deep. Love can clean out everything that has ever happened to you that is painful. So for me,
it's painful, right? And so, and therefore, people, when they've been hurt many times in the past, or past relationships, or even not even the relationship, even just the process getting into the relationship, they've been hurt, and it's like, do I really want to open myself up, open my heart up for that to happen again? And so then sometimes we stop going there, we stop opening ourselves to that.
Yeah, and sometimes we just need a break for a while.
That could be. But at some point, there comes a time like where you are right now, where you are opening your heart, right, Thorbjørn, where you're ready for that and knowing, and now experiencing and knowing what that's like, going back into this and being triggered or being being in it, you know.
Yeah. And it was so surprising to find, some people will laugh, but it was so surprising to find the same patterns as previous relationships that weren't dealt with just come up again, fresh as new, as if they'd already been there.
In
And
a
having
different form or the exact same thing, like
exact same pattern, exact same.
okay.
For me, it's
So how do you deal with that now? Because you can see it, you're aware of it, right? So how do you
right.
how do
Well, I'll tell
you
you how I tried to deal with it, which was a disaster. So what happened was when I don't feel heard or understood, I react very strongly, because that's my childhood. My wound is that no one really cared about how I felt or tried to understand me. So when I get put into that position, either because it is true or because it's just something that I emotionally think is true, then I start to try to fix the other person, because I'm not feeling heard, I'm not feeling understood. So if I could just make the other person do it. So I try to make them hear me and understand me. And the wonderful thing about my partner is that if I do that, that triggers in her the feeling that someone else is telling her she's stupid and she doesn't understand. And that she's being blamed for something and has to defend herself. So that makes her completely unable to listen to anything I say, cannot understand, and does not want to hear me. So it is a perfect spiral in which what triggers me triggers her, and then none of us get what we want, and it just goes to absolute shit the longer it's allowed to go.
what is the cost for you in the relation, you think, if you keep doing that same thing? Like
I think that the cost is that if that happens too much, then eventually both of us just get so tired that we're just like, well, fuck it, we don't want to do this anymore, right? Because it's so exhausting to become so dysregulated mentally, physically. The whole thing is like you're in hell together, right? It's like a circle of hell. You're like hell dwellers that are just burning from the inside. Just this old childhood wound with just it isn't being processed, it's just being made worse. You're just fanning the flames, right? And people have these different patterns. Some people try to fix, some people they try to get away, some are avoidant. But for me, it's like, well, if the other person is the problem, then I'm just going to fix that person. And in all my relationships, what happens is that just overwhelms the other person, and they have some kind of mechanism to cope with that, which is not what I need. And because I'm so hot, I'm a very impulsive person. Because I'm so hot, and so my temper is so flared up, I lose all sense of I lose all common sense, and I just keep pushing harder and harder, and it just gets worse and worse.
Amplifies.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of the key things, I think, is this idea that I think the key problem in relationships is this idea that I'm having an emotion, the other person is causing this emotion. Well, clearly I just need to fix the other person's behavior. That's the logic. And it makes sense, but the problem is the reason why we have that emotional reaction is because it's an old wound. So even if we made the other person no longer trigger it, we would just have avoided confronting this thing in ourselves. And if you look at a child of 3 or 4 that runs around and is happy all the time, and you look at an adult who is 40 years old or whatever, and you see how miserable the adult is naturally, and you see how happy the child is naturally, the reason is all these old emotion dwelling in the adult, just sapping their energy without knowing them. You don't even need to know that it's there it's still going to affect you. That's why a child is naturally happy, and that's why an adult is naturally unhappy. It's because of layers and layers and layers of all this inner stuff that is just weighing us down. So even if you're not in a relationship and you're not being triggered, you are unknowingly feeling the weight of this emotion, this trauma, because you are not happy and free, which a human being is supposed to be happy just by existing. That's our natural state. But all of these heavy emotions wear us down.
Out of curiosity and love, I would say this question comes to you, Thorbjørn. If you weren't reacting, if that wasn't like something that you were doing with her, what would you like? What would you want to do? What would you want to give to her in that moment?
Well, if I weren't reacting, if I wasn't in a space where my love was closed off by this wound, then I would just have reassured her and made her feel safe to be in her emotion, to experience her wound, right?
Mm.
That's what I that's what I would want to do, and I think that's what we would all want to do.
Yeah.
Um,
to give the space for the other person to be seen and held and loved. Right?
And we can do that sometimes, and I think everyone loves to do this, because sometimes we don't both get triggered at the same time, and sometimes the other person is triggered by life instead, and then you can be there for them, and that's a wonderful experience, right? You get to be something good for the other person.
And it's fucking challenging when you're both triggered at the same time and both hot, heated, and it's like reacting from both emotions. Wow, that's an intense energy and not something enjoyable. Well, I don't know. It feels very alive in the moment, right? So
it does, and I think this is an important thing that also me and my partner talked about, is that we are not ourselves when pain is ruling us.
Yeah.
And that is a very key thing to understand, because if you don't understand that, then you don't realize that once it's over, it's not the same person that's left with you. It's not the vicious, angry, or defensive, whatever. That person is no longer there. Your partner is there, and your partner is a good person. When they get triggered, they become a bad person. But those two things are not the same person. So when pain takes us over, we become something that we're not. And that's important both for our partners to know, but for ourselves to know, for forgiveness, is to know that we are good people who become bad people when we're triggered. We're not like bad people who go around with this stuff in us all the time. We're just good people who get pulled out of it because the emotions and the thoughts become so strong that we lose our mind. It's not different at all from alcohol. If you get too much alcohol, you lose control of yourself. And emotions they make you way more drunk than alcohol does, and thoughts do as well. It is a much, much more mind-altering substance than alcohol is. So I think there's forgiveness in that, and both for ourselves and our partner. And remember to separate like that. What that monster you just saw is not your partner. And that monster you just were, that's not you. Such an important thing. And I think everyone naturally knows that when they feel inside, because suddenly they're in a different mind space and they're like, we don't have a problem and I love you. What the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
The switch is so
But it takes
big.
something to kind of to come out of that, out of that emotion, to be able to kind of notice that that's where you're coming from, right? And that's where this forgiveness and this compassion for the other person and for yourself is there. So I would say that's a pretty healthy thing that you actually can talk about it afterwards, Thorbjørn. Like that you can kind of be in it, but then also, then kind of communicate what just happened and how
Yeah.
like you talked about forgiveness. How do you do that with her? Do you, or with yourself? Like, do you kind of, is it something you, yeah.
Well, I think that it's what I think is a very important practice is that this is something that it gives me and her trouble sometimes, but it can give a lot of people trouble, is that if one person has frustrated the other person by being in their pain, and they come out of their pain and they're like, oh, I'm fine now, we're good now. Well, your
Mm.
partner may not be good because you being in your pain is not a good thing for them. So,
And they might be holding on to that as well.
well, it's
What just
very hard
happened
not to,
is,
because if someone uh, deals with you through a filter of pain, they're not being very nice to you, and the thoughts they're projecting about you are not being very nice. For example, a lot of people feel fear in relationships. That's because it's one of their wounds. And so they're looking at their partner like that partner is dangerous for them, and that they should be afraid of them. And that is a wild thing to have projected on you. That you can see in your partner's eyes that they're afraid of you, and then they're afraid you'll hit them or whatever they've experienced in the past. That in itself,
or maybe they're scared that they'll leave,
that could be that too.
like
But
fear of,
whatever it is, they're looking at someone who isn't you, and that's a very strong projection. And that's a hard thing for someone to look at you in a way that you aren't. That is in itself painful. If someone is treating you like you want to do something bad to them, or you're coming from a bad perspective, or whatever it is, it's deregulating to be seen in a negative light when you're not coming from that place. So pain is not just the behavior, like, I'm angry at you, so I'm gonna be, I'm throwing anger at you, and that's unpleasant. But it's also that in the anger, I'm seeing you as my enemy and treating you as my enemy.
mm,
And it's not very nice for someone who loves you and is not triggered to be treated like an enemy. So I would say that what fights do is that they create emotion, they create new pain. Like, we're all dealing with old pain. We know what trauma is. But when was trauma created? Well, trauma was a new emotion once. And when you have a fight, you build up new pain. And that's the pain that eventually becomes old pain if you leave it to just rot, so to speak. So after a fight, you feel in your chest, you feel in your body, you'll feel this new pain. And if you want to get back to love, most people, as far as I'm aware, can't love while at the same time feeling the pain of what the other person did to them. Because, at least for me, the sort of love pipes inside me are full of this emotional gunk, like this anger or frustration or fear or whatever it is. So what I think is an important practice is to hold space for each person to express their frustration, so that they can get rid of all this emotional residue, this new pain, and they can come back to the space of love. And I think where most relationships go wrong is that their logic is this: something bad happens, let's go to a good space and let's try to avoid it.
mm,
And I want to use a metaphor here where I think what that does is that makes the relationship a field full of landmines that everyone is trying to avoid stepping on. And every year there are more landmines because there are more unresolved situations. And everyone's going to step on them one day where they're tired, or where they're drunk, or where they're distracted, or whatever's going on. Someone's going to step on it and it's just going to blow. So I would suggest, as an alternative metaphor, that in a relationship, think of it as having controlled explosions of each other's landmines. Whenever you find a landmine, get together and have a controlled explosion. Get rid of that shit. And the way you do that is you say, well, what you did and so on frustrated me. Can you hold space for me to express my frustration so that I can let go of it forever, no longer hold any resentment for you at all? We can go back to a clean slate of love, and we're not carrying the past with us. Because I
mm.
swear to you all now that what kills every relationship is not the lack of love or willingness. It is just the past piling up. And in
Of
the end, there's
avoidant
of it.
feelings, emotions.
Yeah. And so many landmines just ready to blow. And we all know it from ourselves. We know it from others. We know it from the couples that argue when they get drunk, and someone, or the little
Mm.
snide sarcastic remarks to try and you know release a little bit of tension here there that's built up for years. We know those behaviors, and they just don't work. the idea that if we just try to avoid the hard stuff, we can stay in a good space. That makes the good space smaller and smaller and smaller until there's such a tiny little thing where no one can move or say anything without someone's feelings being hurt, and without all these threads going back to the old things. It's just waiting to explode at some point.
Can I offer a thing that you can do as in a relationship, as a creating like a space for that explosion to happen? You could say,
Yeah,
but
I love it.
in a conscious way, I guess you could say. It's a pretty simple thing. But it's something that I've done with my wife, and also, um, share this with some clients as well who are, have relationship issues, and we all, I think that's like one common thing. I think every client that I've ever worked with is either have had or having a relationship issue, or they're thinking about what it would be like to have a relationship issue if
Yeah.
they're not in a relationship yet. So it's I think it's something that we all experience, and something that is important to us all, right? Because we're human beings. We're going to be together with somebody at some point in our life. And anyway, the thing that I was going to say was, sorry, now I'm just got a little bit distracted. That's all right. So an offering or an invitation for you in a relationship is to, like, for this controlled explosion, is to just, well, controlled, it's not controlled, but a conscious explosion, right? Is to just, like, get together with your partner or husband or wife, and you know what's like inside yourself that you want to share, and they probably know what they want to share. But sometimes it can be so tense and so, like, heated, that emotion, that it's hard to kind of talk about it, right? So getting together and giving the other person some space, and you can do that by just saying, okay, for the next 5 minutes or however many minutes you choose, that other person is talking, and you're just listening. You're not allowed to say anything. You can kind of just keep with the things that you want to say to yourself, and allow the other person to talk and communicate what it is that's, what they want to share with you. And then you switch, and the other person has 5 minutes to talk, and then afterwards you both come together with what you want to say, and basically share that. So, and I've what I've experienced is that it is fucking uncomfortable to be in, to hear the other person basically unloading all their emotions and issues and stuff about you, because it's directed at you, right? And not being able to say anything, but just to be able to listen to them, and listen to them from your heart, and then, but by the time the exercise is finished, or the thing that you do is finished, and 10 minutes is over, there's so much space to just kind of understand the other person, and be actually compassionate towards their pain, where it's coming from, and what's going on for them to be triggered, or whatever it is. And then you can kind of talk about it, and it's a completely different space afterwards. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Have you ever heard this saying, Thorbjørn? All of us have someone in our life that has loved us into being.
No, it's a beautiful saying. What does it mean?
Can mean whatever it means to you. It's actually from a movie, I believe. And the meaning that I put around it is that, like, in our lives, we have people that have given us this unconditional love, and it can be you with your child, or it can be received from, I don't know who. Like for me, when I thought of this, what came to mind was my grandmother, and she's a person in my life that's always given me this unconditional love, who's like literally loved me into being the person I am today. And I think why I'm sharing this, I guess, is it resonates in a way of like, in relationships, like it's love that brings us together, right? But sometimes we get so caught into our situation or our daily life as a parent, as a whatever it is, and we lose this kind of like, or we can lose this in touch with that love, with that like kind of openness. And yeah, I don't know. That's what does it mean to you when you hear those words? Have you had somebody who has loved you into being to it?
I don't think so. I think that someone had to be myself.
That could be, and it can be
It may
a
be
friend.
someone
It
that
can be,
comes.
doesn't have to be somebody like you, who's family. It can be somebody removed in your life.
It may be
Um,
someone that's yet to come. Who knows?
yeah, yeah.
Could be my partner when she gets her shit together. But who knows?
Well, I say she's pretty brave for coming into your life. So,
She's
unfortunately.
absolutely nuts for dealing with someone like me.
At the start of this podcast, you talked about enlightened relationships. What did you mean
Right.
by that? What was your kind of spin on
Well,
that?
I think I think I meant that in a way. What I'm talking about is conscious relationships, but enlightened relationships just sounds a lot more sexy, and that's what a conscious relationship leads to, is an enlightened relationship. Because I think relationships exist to enlighten us. I think it is the fastest spiritual path of everything we can do. Like, you can flee to some monastery and sit alone for 60 years and get more and more stupid every year. And I don't think that in any way compares to the way in which you're confronted by a partner.
Hmm.
I
The intensity
think,
of that.
huh?
It's what I got is like the intensity. Like the
Yeah.
because every day you're mirrored in this like relationship of, or mirrored.
I
Yeah,
think mirrored is a perfect, you are mirrored both on your good and your bad sides, right?
yeah,
You really are mirrored.
and everything is seen, everything is shared, everything is kind of
They see too much, our partners, don't they? They
yeah.
see the good stuff, but they see too much of the bad stuff as well. And that's what allows us to work with it, because we can't see it when we're single. That's why it's so easy to be single in one way, but in another way, of course, there's the loneliness, there's the craving, and so on. But some people stay single just because they don't want their inner demons to come up anymore. They're done with that. A lot of people, they simply stop relationships, or they keep them casual to a point where it never goes any further, because they know where the demons come from, and they know it's love. It isn't people who hate you have to worry about, it's the people who love you. Because if you let them, they will burn you. They will burn every inch of your being until you're free. And that's rough.
And worth it.
Of course, it brings everything. Love brings everything to life. And everything to light.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting that love can both hold both pain and happiness, like in the same relationship? They can be both. It doesn't have to
Mm.
be that there's only the good, or there's only the bad, or I mean, if there was only the bad, you probably wouldn't be in a relationship, right? But
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know.
And that's another thing, that's a very interesting thing, right? How the universe functions from true principles, which we could call contraction and expansion. Everything is always undulating between contracting closer and expanding further apart. Planets does it. Your heart does it. Your chest does it when you breathe. Everything has this dynamic of further away and closer, and that dynamic is generally what keeps the whole world alive, because that dynamic brings energy and that brings life. So even an enlightened relationship will always contract together towards great intimacy, and then it will expand further away with distance and space, because no one is going to have the same thing all the time. That's not energetic, it's not dynamic. There must be change. So even a good relationship, an enlightened relationship, still has fighting, but it's just a different kind of fighting than an unenlightened relationship. But there has to be something that creates space so that there can once again be a desire for intimacy. And the desire for intimacy in itself creates a desire for space. And that's not a bad thing, that's a beautiful thing. And when we find our ego either clinging to the other person and wanting to be with them all the time, that doesn't lead to anything healthy. But similarly, people who want to keep a distance and keep people away and be independent, that also does not lead anywhere good, because they're destroying the natural rhythm of the relationship, which is intimacy, space, intimacy, space. That's the beauty of it. And every couple has their own degree of that, how often they do it, how much they need. But every healthy relationship is always going to have that dynamic. And that's an interesting thing to think about, because it's not like sweet love all the time. That would turn anyone insane. No one wants that. That's not good for you.
How can some people want that? Sweet level.
For a while, probably. But
Until
for
they
how many
realize what
years?
happens when you get it.
Yeah. For how many years are you going to be locked in each other's arms and kissing each other on the face like 24 hours a day before you're just going to murder each other, right? So the interesting thing, it's a dynamic, but so couples will always have to find a way to create space and find intimacy. But the question is whether it's in a destructive way or whether it's in a playful way. And for most people, it's a destructive thing.
When you say that, what do you mean? Like it's a destructive? What does that look like?
Well,
or what does a playful way look like as well? What is both?
Well, a playful way is could be like, teasing each other, or trash talking each other a little bit, or, creating some space or distance in a playful way. If both people feel each other are safe and they trust each other, then you can experience with the negative range of emotions. You can play with those as well. Because the interesting thing is that love is not the positive range of emotions. Love is energy, and energy is all the emotions. Now, not everyone may be ready to experiment with certain emotions, but every emotion is just a new flavor of energy, which is just a new flavor of love if you love someone. And some people get very caught up in this. You have like people, BDSM couples, who are totally fixated on like pain and all that stuff. But that is kind of an unbalancing, because now they're just like, some people are on the good stuff, they're on the bad stuff. You don't need to get fixed anywhere. That is, again, going to lead to stagnation. But you can use the whole range of the human emotional spectrum as you become more and more secure in each other and you feel more safe with each other. You can express more interesting things, and you can use that to create space. You can, like I said, you can tease each other, you can play fight, or sometimes we fight for fun, and that's very different. But that's another way. That's a way you can playfully create separation. So love can be found in every expression. love can be found. But a lot of the ways we do create distance is because we're involuntarily taken over by pain. And that's not a great way to do it. It does the job, but it's not, it would be better not to do it that way.
You know what I feel like is an important thing with that, with like the, yeah, with all the stuff that we're talking about now, is this kind of like coming back to this like communication and the honesty in that,
So much.
whatever's coming up, whether it is that you're frustrated or you're, I mean, it's much easier to communicate when you just purely love love the person. You just want to tell them how good they are, right? But also talking about the other stuff when you are frustrated or annoyed or whatever is showing up. And I think that's, when you're talking about this, of the full range of emotions that we experience, when we stop communicating the emotions that some people consider bad, right? That's anger
Mm.
or frustration or annoyance or
Shame.
jealousy or shame or things like that, which, if you're alive and you experience those emotions from either a little or a large amount, right?
Mm.
And what I notice in my relationship, and also in people coming for therapy and things like that, is like there's this bias towards it to be good all the time. And I think that's what, you were speaking to earlier about this, like contraction and expansion of, and also like the full in that, the love and the full range of emotions, and this importance of finding a way to communicate those emotions in an honest, as honest as you can be, right? Well, I think just in an honest way,
Yeah.
as honest as, basically just communicating, like, even though that is uncomfortable, even though that maybe probably the other person might get hurt from what you share, and at the same time you're being honest. At the same
Yeah.
time you're sharing this, and you're not avoiding it, because when, like you were talking about earlier, when you do keep avoiding things, the landmines get bigger and bigger, and you eventually find it hard to navigate between what you can say and what you can't say, and all this shit. And it's just like, let's just kind of, if it's possible, put that aside for a second and say, okay, if I am able to communicate this, to make this explosion now, then
Mm.
down the line it's not going to be as big of an explosion as it might be, because I'm sharing this, I'm communicating honestly with what I'm feeling now, whether that is anger or frustration, or whether the person's pissed me off, or whatever it is, and doing it in a safe and loving way, right? Doing it in a way where maybe you're not reacting straight from the emotion, but you've kind of settled a little bit in yourself, so you can consciously do it. You can consciously talk about what happened and what annoyed you, and how you want to work with that moving forward, and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because now you're touching on being true to love. And this is directly stolen from Barry Long, the Australian tantric that I talk about now and then. Go Google him. He's an amazing person. And being true to love, he says, be true to love. Don't be true to each other. Be true to love. Because when you're true to each other, you start to try and shield the other person from their trauma, from their triggers, from their problems, whatever. And as you do that, you stop saying your truth, and as you do that, the love slowly disappears because you can't be authentic and free anymore. So you're not present for a space of love and intimacy because you're being true to the other person, to their ego, and so you slowly lose love for them. But if you're being true to love, then you are always going to speak your truth, because you know if you don't speak your truth, your love is going to disappear very quickly, because you're not allowed to be free, you're not allowed to be honest, you're not allowed to be authentic, and you can't love if you can't do that. So two people should not be true to each other. They should be true to love, because the moment they stop being true to love, they don't have anything together anyway. When they can no longer speak their truth, their relationship starts deteriorating into compromise, into past fights, and into some sad tragedy of security where they at least have each other. At least they have that. But love is dead. So what's the point? So if you're true to love, then you have to say what you have to say to be able to love the person.
That's a new perspective, maybe a different perspective to most people come into the relationship with, right?
It's a sword that cuts away everything that comes in the way of loving a person. And that's also why, to circle back on what you said about sharing freely and so on, if you can understand this, then your relationships can all be much more different. In a healthy relationship, or in a conscious relationship, or in an enlightened relationship, when your partner wants to express frustration to you, they are not doing it because they want to blame you or accuse you or say bad things about you. They are clearing out their shit. You're clearing out their shit so they can love you again. They are yelling or whatever they need, whatever way they need to express it, they're doing it so they can get back to loving you. That's why they're doing it. So you don't need to defend yourself against it, because this person wants to go back to loving you. And if you start stopping them, and we all would do that, I do it as well, it's difficult not to, because the ego wants to, it doesn't like that. But if you stop that process, the person carries this frustration around. They can't come back to loving you because they have all this emotion in them. They need to get that out. And maybe you truly did cause it by being a moron. We're all stupid sometimes. Sometimes it's not intentional, but sometimes we do something that's just neglectful, that's just stupid. And we gotta own up and we gotta say, like, I'm sorry. I'm gonna lay down, and you can just fucking kick me until you feel better, and we'll go back to love. And the ego doesn't like that. But true love requires that. It requires taking responsibility for what we've done, letting the other person rage it out. And some relationships are much more quiet. Like you and me, we're kind of intense. Our partners are kind of intense. Some people do this at a much more calmer level, so it may look different. But the important thing is clear out your shit so you can come back to love.
And whatever relationship you're in is still the same function of emotions getting triggered, and fighting or arguing or whatever, or avoiding that. And so it may look in different ways, but it's the same thing, right? So
some attack, some defend, some run away, right? There are different ways of dealing with it. And it brings me back to another point. Something I've found that helps me a lot in my relationship is it's understanding that if I desperately feel like I need something from my partner, I probably need to get the fuck out of that conversation. Because first of all, there was a time where I didn't even know her, and I wasn't going around craving whatever she had at that point. I didn't even know who she was. And now I can get into a state where I'm like, I have to get this from her. She has to do X, Y, Z, whatever. And if I'm in that state of mind, I just need to back the fuck off and take some time alone and let my mind come back, because my ego has run away with me. And often often whenever there's something I really need my partner to understand, if I keep pressing her, it just makes it harder for her to understand, and she becomes less willing to understand it because it's frustrating. But if I back the fuck off, take time and space and regulate myself, then when she comes back to me later, she's already understood and I didn't have to do anything.
That sounds like a much easier way of going about it.
Yeah, so what I'm discovering is that the most important thing in my relationship is to take care of my triggers and her triggers, and just to back off when we start to get into a game that none of us is winning. When we're playing two different games.
Another way of backing off is like letting go, or like kind of, sorry.
Yeah, if you can let go, that's great.
Yeah.
So like in most cases, I've found for me that if I desperately need the other person to understand something or do something or fix something, I'm not myself. I've already lost my mind because I'm a human being. I don't need anything specific to happen to be happy. So if right now I think I absolutely need something from the other person or something to happen, I'm already out of my mind. So I just need to ask for space or talk about it or get some distance, get back into my mind and be like, okay, now that I'm in my senses again, what is actually going on here? And then all of a sudden, I have a whole different way of dealing with things. And interesting, the most interesting thing I found is that a lot of the problems, usually the thing I think is a problem in the moment, when I get some space and calm down, it's not even a real problem and it doesn't need to be fixed. I just need to sit with the child inside that is just desperately trying to cope with this wound that has flared up. So often I'm trying to fix a problem that isn't even a problem. I just need to calm down because I'm out of my mind. So this giving space and time is something I found works very well. And if I can feel we're we're not in a constructive space, then I'm just like, okay, let's separate for now. Come back when it works. Instead of trying to brute force something where it's just our two egos trying to fight each other while it's hiding behind the walls. Because that just doesn't go anywhere.
Sounds like there's a lot of learning happening right now in your
Yeah, I am learning a lot. And I'm
relationship.
seeing and I'm falling into a lot of traps and I'm also acting like an idiot, but I'm also learning a lot. So it's very
Yeah.
very,
But
very
also,
enlightening.
you're also growing because you're using the stuff that you've gone so deeply into yourself in the last years in
Yeah.
this real-time relationship and experience of all the emotions that come up when we do allow ourselves to love and open up our heart to that other person. I mean, that brings like so much emotion into the space, into the room, into
Yeah.
the you and the other person, right? And when you love fiercely like that, when you open yourself up so much like that, then it's yeah, things happen, right? Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of aliveness, a lot of energy in there, and yeah,
It goes very deep. And then when you throw sex into the mix as well, is sex physically goes deep into bodies. And that really, really draws up all the emotion, like physically. So it's just it really is just you're just trawling up everything that's lying there on the bottom for a long time. And that's why a lot of people get into a relationship and they're like, wait, this isn't me. Like, what the hell is going on? But this was in you. So when people go into a relationship, I would just suggest like be ready for these things to come up.
mm.
Because if you're someone that doesn't have any of those things, you're lucky, but the chances are very small. And in most cases, or in all cases, people we are attracted to are usually perfectly designed to trigger exactly the kind of pain we have. And we have just exactly the patterns they need to trigger their pain. So
So we can
every
both learn so much from each other and grow so much,
or you end up tearing each other to pieces.
or you end up
Because every relationship that comes from a natural attraction is a match made in hell, which can make its way to heaven if you work on it. But
if
do
you work
not
on it.
make any mistake that it is made in hell. It is made for you to trigger each other. And that's why sometimes you find a person that people are like, oh, they're so sweet and they're stable and it's, you should really be with this person. And you're just like, I can see that, but I just don't feel anything. And that's because the person doesn't have the pain you need. So we truly attract people that are the worst for us and the best for us at the same time. And that is an important knowledge to have because it explains a lot of what's going to happen, which may seem like a bad thing, but is actually potential for growth.
I've enjoyed talking about relationships from this perspective. This is a yeah. How has it been for you to share this, to be in this?
I think it's so important to share because I think a lot of relationships are deadlocked or become deadlocked with these two people retreating behind their pain and throwing garbage at each other, and no one dares to come out from their defenses. So I think for me, sharing this isn't even a question. It doesn't. I have to share this because if just a few people can approach relationships in a more vulnerable, more conscious way and find a healthier way to do things, that's such a big thing, because relationships are the most difficult thing on the earth. There is nothing else that is as difficult as relationships. Even if you were to try to conquer the whole world, it's not as difficult as relationships, because in relationships you have to conquer yourself and you have to help the other person to conquer themselves. There is no greater achievement than this. It is the highest spiritual path. So if I can help anyone by opening up about it, that's a foregone conclusion. That's not even a question. If anyone can suffer a little less in this way that we do, because relationships are the only thing that can truly bring us into hell. Like we go straight to hell when these things in us are triggered. It's such an insane amount of suffering. And sometimes that's exactly the suffering we need to bring us to the next step. But it is very, very painful. Like, holy moly, it's painful. It's crazy.
And that's also sometimes to kind of confront that and just acknowledge that about relationships. You talked in the very beginning about how society or how movies make out that like love is happiness and all this stuff. Well, all of us know, if we've been in any relationship, that it's not like that all the time, right? And this pain is inevitable, and it's there to teach us and to grow from and to learn from, and to go and the crazy thing about the pain that we experience within relationships is it gives, if we're able to come like work with that and to grow and with that and with the other person, then the love actually gets deeper and deeper the further we go with that person and go into those things and actually are vulnerable to work with that stuff. And sometimes we're not. Sometimes we don't have the guts to do that in that moment, and that's maybe okay for that moment. And then at some point we will find that. I want to say courage, but I don't think it's courage. I think it's more just like our own truth, that we know inside us that that's important to us, right? But we just sometimes don't do it. And so there comes a point where we just like, if we're brutally honest with ourselves, we realize what we want to do in that moment. I mean, with that relationship, and yeah.
And there is a great fear in us that truth will destroy and honesty will destroy a relationship. But the most beautiful relationships are one in which truth and honesty is welcome.
Yeah.
And we are here to allow each other to express all those sides of us that we haven't been able to, and see every part of our darkness. So, and what a great love it is to find someone who is just as messed up as you are, and with who you can be free and crazy and stupid, right? That's such a beautiful thing. And most people are, but they may not dare to show that side of themselves until you do. So, take the step, and whoever you scare away, they weren't the person anyway. You really don't have to worry about scaring people away. You should worry about not truly being yourself.
It's a pretty important one.
Because we're all weirdos, right? And we need to find our weirdo out there.
Connect with that one person that's meant for us.
Yeah.
maybe more than one. I don't know.
Yeah,
But the
that's
one
what the kids are
person.
doing these days.
Love.
Love, love, love.
But I really hope that, if you're listening into this episode and got this far through, that you've taken away something from this in your relationship or resonated in some way. Maybe learned something, maybe even are inspired to kind of do something different in the relationship. Who knows, right? But either way, we're all in this together, and I think the thing about being honest, right, and just speaking your truth, being yourself, being authentic, even though when times get tough in the relationship, even though it might hurt the other person, even though that there is pain, that honesty, that love, that truth, I think that's what makes a healthy relationship, like, to keep moving. Yeah, what I want to say is, like, that's what's the difference between, like, a relationship being short and it being something that you're in it for the long term, I guess.
And that's why I'm always just like dropping my shit from the beginning in a relationship, because I know that with the right person it'll scare them away, and with the wrong person it'll scare them away, but with the right person I'll see right away, okay, can they deal with this shit or not? So I'm never worried about being honest. I'm never worried about being too honest. I'm worried about not being honest enough.
Yeah, I think that's like a highlight thing of this episode. Be honest, be loving, be honest, be truthful, and
Be true to love, Be true to
yeah,
truth.
and don't be afraid to kind of let go of, like, the need to be right, or the need to kind of, make your point or whatever.
Mm.
I don't know where that came from,
Ask
but
for love. Ask for space, but don't ask for emotional demands and ego victories.
hmm. Well, that's about it from us today, Thorbjørn. Unless there's anything else you wanna share for this episode.
No, I think we got around everything really well.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see you on the trail.
See you out there on the trail, and yeah, we'd love to hear about your relationship or your journey with this pain and this whatever whatever you want to share, and we hope you get a lot from this. So yeah, thanks for being with us on this journey and listening in.
See you around.
See you on the trail.